set? Call the meeting to order. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the Board of Selectmen on September the 12th. Tonight we are meeting to interview the three finalists for the town administrator's position. One interview will begin now at 6, one at 7, and one at 8. Could I have a motion to appoint clerk for the meeting, please?
So moved.
Yep. Who?
I move Mrs. Begley be appointed clerk for this meeting.
Have a second? Second by Mr. Slavin. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, aye. Mrs. Begley, congratulations.
If you
Hi,
would serve.
thank you.
It's easy. It's on CD, so makes
Thank
it worth
goodness.
it. Good evening. I thought that we would use the process that we would give, in this case, Michael, 5 minutes or so to introduce himself to us in the town, and then do a round-robin questions with some discussion amongst the board, and then kind of keep it back and forth and interactive so that we can get the most out of our time with Michael tonight.
Mr.
So
Chair,
Mike,
if
yes.
I might, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you mind if I do a roll call?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, roll call. Skipped right over it.
Mr. Chair, the selectmen, Titlebaum, Slavin, yourself, Mr. Chair, and Mrs. Begley are present, as is Town Council, Richard Bowen, and Michael Dutton, one of the applicants for the Town Administrator's position, and Mrs. Winslow will be late.
Skipped right over that because I knew who was here.
It's okay.
All right. Michael, good evening and welcome. And thank you for applying for the position of town administrator. And if you would just take some time and introduce yourself to the board and to the town.
Sure.
And why you're extremely interested in becoming our next town administrator.
Sure.
Thank
Well,
you.
first of all, thank you for having me back. It's quite an honor for me. My name, as you mentioned, is Michael Dutton. I've been practicing attorney on Martha's Vineyard on and off for the last about 18 years. In that period of time, I've also had a number of other professional, served in a number of other professional capacities. I've been a hospital administrator out there for about 4 years, and I was town administrator for the town of Oak Bluffs for just a little over 5 years. When I moved to the Vineyard, I did so after law school. This is sort of an aside, give you a sense of why I'm there. I moved out there back in '92, right after I got out of law school. I'd become sick and needed a place to go and work myself back into some health. So I had family that was out there in the building industry. So I went out and worked with my cousin for what I thought would be about 2 months. Turned into a bit longer than 2 months. In that period of time, I met my wife, who had had a daughter from a previous marriage. And when we married, or when we contemplated getting married, I also had a discussion with her. We had a discussion about, where we would go. And being there and raising a daughter close to her father was something that was very important to her. So I agreed to that, and hence here we are today. Megan is now out of high school and on to college, Bridgewater. So we have sort of an open door in front of us. We can go wherever we would like. We both love Southeast Massachusetts. We're both ready to move probably away from the island, and hence any opportunity in Southeast Massachusetts for a really challenging professional job is what I was looking for. So knowing that the practice of law really wasn't my passion, I've been practicing lately in municipal permitting, municipal state permitting, which obviously, having been a town administrator, I've got a little bit of experience with. I started out being a trust and estates attorney, doing a fair amount of document drafting, trust drafting, a little bit of real estate work as it related to that, and so on. So that brings me to Wareham, and why Wareham, and why right now. I think I answered why right now, but why Wareham? Wareham is, it seems to me, it's sort of a critical crossroads. I've gone through the Department of Revenue audits. I've gone through your town charter. I've gone through town meeting minutes, and I think Wareham is really struggling for some stability. And I can tell you, in all my professional experiences, it wasn't planned this way. Maybe it's the nature of Martha's Vineyard, but I would step into positions that were crying out, or organizations that were crying out for some stability. Martha's Vineyard Hospital had something like 10 CEOs in the space of 12 years. I was not the CEO. I was brought on to raise money, be the chief development officer after the hospital had come out of a bankruptcy. But I soon took on a number of other hats: director of general services, human resource director. I think there were a few more, but that seemed to be sort of my calling. After I had gotten out of college, I went to work for a building supply company, wholesale building supply company that also was coming out of a bankruptcy. In fact, I went to work for another one that was sort of having some rocky times. And the same is true when I came into the town of Oak Bluffs. I was a selectman for about 8 years prior to stepping down and becoming the town administrator. So I know a little bit about what it's like to sit in your place and deal with a lot of controversial issues, deal with a lot of instability. Oak Bluffs was a very similar town to Wareham demographically, and it it really cried out for some stability, some financial stability as well, some financial direction, and I think both as a selectman and then also as an administrator, I think I provided that stability. So I like the thought of a challenge. My professional career has been built on challenges. I don't quite know what a lot of town managers, town administrators do in a lot of the cities and towns that have no commercial base or have no particular issues. Being involved in operations, being involved in trying to provide a wall of sorts between the politics and the operations of a town are important to me, and I think I do a good job of that. So that's basically why Wareham.
Very good. You noticed when you said you didn't hold much of a passion for law, those two guys almost fell out of their seats. We have town council, and Mr. Teitelbaum is also an attorney, so they kind of almost fell out of their chair when you said that. Okay, good. Thank you very much for that. Peter, if you would like to begin.
Yeah, I'll start off with and thank you for your introduction. It was fairly comprehensive and did a good job of explaining your background and your interest. I'd like to start off by posing a hypothetical to you. You're the town administrator in Wareham, and one of us storms into your office and demands that you fire a town employee over some perceived slight. What do you do?
That's happened before. I think one of the things, and I alluded to it just a minute ago, I think one of the things that's very important for a town administrator to do is to provide that separation between the politics and the operations. For the most part, I imagine, without knowing any of them, I imagine that most of your town employees are dedicated employees. Most government, municipal government department heads wouldn't be department heads unless they were really committed to it, especially right now. There's a lot of public backlash with government employees generally, and certainly in a more politically active town, there's going to be more of that even. But in that particular scenario, I think my job is to sit that selectman down and say, look, number one, what's the problem? What's your problem with that particular employee? Number two, make it clear that I'm not going to run out of my office and fire an employee just because one person on the board wants me to. But I would think that if there was an employee in town that had problems, after a short period of time on the job, I would know about that problem, or I would know about that difficulty interacting with the public, if that's what the problem is, and provide some counseling to that employee. Now, I fully recognize in a small town that there are deep relationships between elected officials, policymakers, and employees that would be under me, and that's something you have to deal with. In a big city, it's not as big an issue, but certainly in a small town where a lot of the labor base comes from the community, there's going to be a lot of relationships between the board and employees that at least on the surface might undercut my authority. But I think that would be my responsibility to really be very proactive about issues brewing amongst the staff and try to nip them in the bud before they become issues for the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Slavin?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, sir.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you. The position of town administrator deals with many segments of our population for age-related issues. Could you briefly, by age groups, describe your understanding of the needs of pre-20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 plus? And then as a secondary backup, how best would you approach each of these groups?
That's a great question. I think just in terms of I didn't write down the age groups, but in terms of the youngest, I think alcohol and drug abuse is a huge issue, and it's an issue that the schools struggle to deal with. I know the healthcare industry struggles to deal with. Providing an alternative source of activity for kids is extremely important, whether that's done through at a municipal level or done through a nonprofit level or a for-profit level. Providing an alternative to that to the root of drugs and alcohol is extremely important. For the oldest in the population, the cost of living is going to be critically important. Not feeling alone for a lot of the older folks that live in this town. It's the same as where I live. I delivered Meals on Wheels for a period of time, and I was consistently shocked by the number of people who lived alone and that I had never seen before and never heard of before. And in a small community such as ours, that's surprising, but they're there, and they need the exposure, they need the social interaction that comes with whatever Council on Aging or simply a contact with a Meals on Wheels deliverer. So those are the two extremes. In between, it really boils down to jobs. I think Wareham has a slightly higher unemployment rate than the rest of the state, and certainly when it comes to jobs, providing municipal government can't always do a whole lot other than to provide a very calm and rational and level playing field for businesses to develop and to grow. And I think that's the number one issue facing that whole range of people in between kids and older folks, is good, sustainable jobs.
Mrs. Begley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Mr. Dutton.
Hello.
When you were describing walls, I think what I heard you saying was boundaries, that to maintain boundaries. And did you implement, or were they already implemented in Martha's Vineyard, any kind of policy and procedures for town employees?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's critical for any town, is a good set of policies and procedures in terms of how, and I assume you're specifically referring to how employees deal with the public or how elected officials deal with employees, or just generally?
Well, we're kind of, by charter, we're unable to interfere with day-to-day in the town charter. But I'm talking about for over in town hall or all town employees for policies and procedures, so that people know what they're supposed to be doing, so that they can be everybody's comfortable because they know what they're supposed to be doing, as does everyone else, including the citizens.
I guess then I would step back. I'd say specific to that, we didn't have formal policies and procedures, with the exception of one, which was more kind of humorous than anything else. Back in the 1980s, when Oak Bluffs was sort of known as the Wild West statewide, we had, I wasn't around, thank goodness. But back then, the Board of Selectmen was trying to battle. There was no town administrator, there was no executive secretary. It was the 3-member Board of Selectmen that ran the town. And they were trying to battle, all the rumors that were floating around town hall. So they instituted a policy that said there will cease to be any rumors. Anybody caught circulating rumors in town hall will be terminated immediately.
That was their policy.
So, which begs the question, I mean, if you give that to town council is going to say, well, how do you know it's a rumor and not true? But anyway, I thought that was, I could clearly implement that in Wareham if that would be the choice of the board. So I guess to answer your question, we didn't have formal policies and procedures governing the relationships, and it was unfortunate. And in fact, I think and I'll tell you, I consider one of my failures my inability to get the board to act on adopting a whole host of policies and procedures. So I'm afraid that the improvements that we made really were improvements based merely on the force of personality or the character of the people that held the elected seats, and not necessarily on a printed policy.
But it would be something that you would actively pursue.
Absolutely. I think implementing policies and procedures in a whole host of areas of municipal government is critical, and I'll tell you why. It's because when you absent policies and procedures, and I'll use the example that I may have used before, but car rental companies. Mm-hmm. We had a bylaw, and Oak Bluffs is not a charter community, so it's a general law municipality. We had no bylaws governing car rental places, and we never thought we needed them because there were 3 or 4 and they were consistent. They'd been year after year, nothing had ever changed. Well, all of a sudden one year one of the landlords had booted out one, another one came in, and he wanted to stage about 170 cars on a lot that could take about 20 cars. And there's an area that cried out for a policy. So when that comes to the Board of Selectmen, it's a free-for-all. And there's really no guidance. And so in order to have a proper discussion about whether or not you're going to license a car rental company for 170 cars on a 20-car lot, it would be good to have a policy. And even if the policy said, yeah, you can have 170 cars, but you have to demonstrate where you're going to stage those cars off-site, or whatever the policy is, at least it gives the Board of Selectmen some parameters within which to make a decision, and it doesn't become just an open free-for-all. So I do think that's just an example, obviously, but I do think creating policies for the board is critical to consistent board functioning.
Well, to clarify, the Board of Selectmen does have policies. In fact, right now we're going through all of them. We're kind of slogging through. But I think my question was more because that would be day-to-day. So these would be policies that would be, the town administrator would work in conjunction with the director of the various departments to craft the policies and procedures for each department so that everyone knew what their job was and what they needed to accomplish on a yearly basis. I'm a nurse. My background is nursing. My life is driven by policies and procedures. So I've been kind of beating this drum since I've been in the seat.
And if you noticed in your Department of Revenue audit back in 2010, one of the things that they were very insistent upon was, and this isn't just Wareham, this is statewide, they've been very insistent upon clear financial policies, and it really
That's right.
does hit, drive right home the importance of how do you do things from a financial perspective. As simple as, when somebody comes in to pay their taxes, they owe $1,000 and they come in with a check for $1,200. What do you do with that $200? And it may seem minuscule, may seem silly, but you need a policy to determine where that $200 go, because it could go back to pay a back tax, it could go forward to pay, prospectively to pay the next quarter's tax, but you need a policy to dictate that. So I don't, honestly, I don't know if that kind of policy has been done yet, but that's critical. Having really good, tight job descriptions, which is really a corollary of good policy, is also critical. And that's something that I did in Oak Bluffs, essentially rewrote, did a compensation and classification survey, and then rewrote job descriptions based on a lot of those results.
Great,
So.
thank you very much. It's 6:25, Mrs. Winslow's arrived.
Yes, Mr. Dutton.
Hello.
I apologize for being late.
That's quite all right. Should I repeat everything I said?
Please, start from the beginning. No, I'm good. I thought the meeting was at 7. Oh. Well, Mr. Dutton, as you know, I served on the screening committee, so I had an opportunity to have a great deal of conversation with you, and I'm at a little disadvantage because I don't know what the prior questions were, but thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, good thing that my question is very different from that. I want to know what sets you apart from everybody else. What are you going to bring to this table that nobody else is going to offer us?
That's a great question. I think, for better or worse, I think I have an extremely calm demeanor. I don't get wound up about issues. I'll give you great advice. I'll give you my feeling about how you should look at an issue. But I don't, whatever the result is, that's the result of the Board of Selectmen. That's the result that gets carried out. And I think I'm increasingly led to believe by a lot of seeing a lot of other towns operate that there aren't a lot of other towns that have that really calm approach to municipal government. And I think, it seems like something very simple, but I think that's one of the things that I can really bring to Wareham that very few other people could.
We talked a lot during the initial screening process about how well versed you are in how the process of government works, that you've sat in the selectman chair and that you understand that this board is a policy setting board and it's here to give you directive and it's your job to carry that directive out. So that is the answer I would have expected from you. Thank you.
And I would only add to that I think, I think you can either see that my role or my serving as a selectman prior to being a town administrator is a double-edged sword. You can think, oh, the last thing we need is a 6th selectman. Or you can look at it as, me understanding what it's like to sit in that seat and understanding the pressures on you from your constituents, from the public, and trying to make the decisions that you have to make. And they won't be easy decisions, but at least give you the information and the ammunition you need to make a decision that's right for you. So.
Well, and I do think it's somewhat unfortunate that the initial interviews weren't televised, and we don't have time to get into the discussion that we got in that day about these various roles. But we did, just for the benefit of the public, talk about understanding those roles and respecting them. If the board decides to do something that you don't necessarily agree with or is against your advice, one of your we talked about, one of the questions was, what do you do? Do you gather everybody in a dark room and tell them that you don't agree with us, but this is what you need to do? But you had a really, and I don't remember exactly what the answer was, but the answer was very good, that you go and you carry it out professionally. And so you're right, I do think it's somewhat of a double-edged sword, but it does bring some experience. This board, everybody sitting on this board is in their first term. So, it's valuable experience.
It is.
What's that?
Oh, yeah, just one question, right?
Just one comment and then a question. When you were at Martha's Vineyard, to go to Mrs. Begley's question, policies and procedures, that's something that some of us have struggled with here for many years, let's just put it that way. And it's one of the things that we've been trying to correct, both as a board, sewer commissioners, alcohol policies, and all that stuff. But when you were at Martha's Vineyard Hospital, right, Jaco was coming, you made sure that all departments had policies and procedures written before they showed up, right? So you're familiar with that question, because I think part of that question, I don't know that it got answered, but it was about having policies and procedures for employees as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, that's, I mean, you're not, Wareham's not unique.
Right.
In that regard. There are towns, and I've just told you, Oak Bluffs was one of them, that had very few policies and procedures. In my professional life in the hospital, absolutely, everything is dictated by policy. And Mrs. Begley's right. I mean, that's nothing happens unless you conform to a policy. And if you don't conform to the policy and something happens, then you and your license and your hospital and its license, are on the line. So you certainly, in a hospital setting, you absolutely develop policy and you make sure that it works and you make sure that your employees follow it. In a municipal setting, just because of the nature of the work and the nature of how government works, policies aren't always developed. The best thing that I can do as a town administrator is give you policy options, give you policy choices. I certainly hope the board is looking at policies, but I hope you're not the ones trying to draft the policies, because that really is the role of staff. With a little bit of direction, staff should be able to draft, appropriate policies and then bring them to you for adoption.
Right, and that's exactly what's going on. The police department just finished theirs. They got their state accreditation. The Board of Selectmen are working on 2 sets of policies, the sewer and our policies, because in Wareham we act as Board of Sewer Commissioners as well. So,
and I guess I'd hate to interrupt you, I'd only say that, it's not as if we didn't have any policies. We did have sewer policies. We did have the police. Oak Bluffs Police are also an accredited department. They had very strict policies, or I shouldn't say strict, they had very clear policies on a whole host of areas as the accreditation requires. And then obviously alcohol policy, which is really critical. We had very, very thorough alcohol policy as well. So,
thank you. Now my question is pretty specific, and I think that after sitting here for almost 3 years now, I think it's probably the number one issue that citizens have with Wareham government. And I heard you mention a charter, and I heard you mention bylaws, but Wareham has a town meeting, form of government. Twice a year we meet, articles, right? And we also have a charter, and we also have a set of bylaws. So there's a couple of questions raised here where I've been thinking about this for some time, as I can tell by the look on your face you understand that. And my impression is this: if you're the town administrator, even before you took the reins, that there should be at least a 2-day workshop for the town administrator, calling in elders and studying the charter and bylaws before you answer the phone call. Because I think I'm making a statement, I don't want to do that. But, so my point is that if you're answering the phone and you're making decisions for the town, and you haven't studied the charter, and you haven't studied the bylaws, then you're going down a road that you're not supposed to be on. So my question to you is pretty simple, based on that story. Have you worked in a situation where a town had a charter and bylaws, and how do you felt that you performed based on that set of bylaws in the charter?
Oak Bluffs did not have a charter. It had a set of bylaws, and the bylaws admittedly were outdated. The town had gone through, I think it was when I was a selectman, the town had gone through a process to update the bylaws. And then at town meeting took all the bylaws and rescinded them and then adopted a brand new set of condensed bylaws in one document, which was, quite an accomplishment. Although it still violates the bylaw to walk your pig up Circuit Avenue. That was one of the bylaws that was very important.
As well as the rumors.
Yeah, and the rumor. Well, that was a policy. But I think, to your point, I think it is critical that the town administrator or anybody that comes to work for the town really review the charter, understand where they fit in to that charter, review the bylaws, understand where they fit in within those bylaws, and then, recognizing as any town, just as any town is, there's a difference between the charter and the bylaws and the way things have always been done. And I think that part of what I can do is talk to people that have been around since 77 or 78, whenever your charter was adopted, and understand why the charter was adopted. What were the issues swirling around then that were really critical to the town that really pushed the adoption of a charter, because adopting a charter is not an easy process. And then over the years, why have there been pressures to change the town governance again? What doesn't work in the town meeting form of government that people feel compelled to bring forward a structural change, whether it's a town council form of government, mayor form of government, what have you. Just find out where those people are coming from and sort of a little bit of the background of the town and why people feel the way they do. Because invariably, town meeting form of government is a challenge, and anybody that administers or manages a town with a town meeting form of government will tell you that. And I think I had mentioned when we had a discussion several weeks ago, you go out west and you say, oh, well, we have a town meeting. They have no idea what you're talking about. Because New England is really one of the few, is the only place in the country that really adheres to town or has town meeting form of government anymore. The smallest towns in Florida, the smallest towns in Arizona have town council form of government. That's a given. They don't know that, and they think, when you describe a town meeting form of government, they think that's got to be the craziest thing I've ever heard of. I mean, you're telling me that everybody in the town, 20,000 people conceivably, could come to one place and start to vote on these, minute little issues? They don't get it. But the flip side is that it's a very traditional, a very pure form of democracy that people are very reluctant to give up. And I respect that. I understand that. But in a town like Wareham, where there's been pressure to give up that town meeting form of government, I think it's really critical to know why. Because what I started to say was, I think 9 times out of 10, the change is being forced by something other than a desire to move to a different form of government. I think the change is being forced by, maybe a fractious board that doesn't get along. Maybe it's being, generated by, crazy politics that is steered off in the wrong direction. But there's an underlying reason for that, which is a very long-winded answer to your very simple question.
And I agree with you. But the thing that makes it neutral and neutralizes that are the words that are written on those pages in the charter or the bylaws, right? Mm-hmm. Because then, you like Steve, and I come in and want to put up a 10-foot fence, and for example, and you say, I like Steve, it's okay. Alan comes in and you say, you know what, you got to go to zoning, that's what causes the problem in the blogs and all that stuff, right? But by by governing by those documents, and that hasn't been done here in a very long time, I can tell you that. And that's what causes a great deal of outrage in the town. But by governance on those on the words on those pages makes a huge difference, because then everybody gets treated the same. And that's why the documents were created. Right.
And that to address that point just a little bit, I think one of the ways that you go from being politically a rough and tumble atmosphere to a town with stability is that you, regardless of who it is, you put everybody through the same process. Presumably it's a written process, but you put everybody through that same process. Now, I often use the example, or in the past I've used this example. If I were a shop owner and I was looking to expand, say I owned a business in Marion, and I was looking to expand, and there was 20,000 people sitting here in Wareham who I thought could use my service or could use my product, and I looked at my option of either going here or going to another town, and the other town had very clear zoning bylaws, very clear regulations, very clear process about how to go about getting my business licensed, permitted, and up and running. Invariably, I'm going to go to whatever town has the clearest process and is the most stable. Now, stable doesn't mean that everybody agrees with everything. Stable just means that as a business owner, I know what to expect when I come into a community. I've seen time and again business owners come into, in my case, Oak Bluffs, or any of the other towns out there, and be completely flummoxed by the treatment they're getting. There are some stores could just opened, didn't go through any process at all, and then they come in and they're told that they have to go to the planning board, the zoning board. I mean, similar example.
Right.
But when you put somebody through that process, when you put everybody through that process, it does not just them good, it doesn't just do you good, it does the town good.
Right. Thank you. Do you have any questions of us?
I don't think so. I think the last time I was here, I got a couple of questions answered, and
Okay.
I think I've done a fair amount of work.
If you guys want to run through, we got about 10 more minutes or so. If you want to get another question in, we'll go back around.
Yeah.
Mr. Tolman?
Yes. Wareham, you're obviously familiar with the town, but we have 54 miles of coastline. We have hundreds of acres of open space and undeveloped land, and we also have a lot of potential recreational opportunities on private lands. But to date, the town government really hasn't done much to coordinate the promotion of Wareham as a tourist mecca. What would you do to get the ball rolling?
I agree with you. I think Wareham has incredible potential, both to draw, whether it's second homeowners or draw tourists to the area, and I agree. I don't see that that's been really leveraged. But I do think that one of the things, as I said before, I think one of the things that is critical for this board and your town administrator is to provide a calm atmosphere. Basically, a calm atmosphere is an inviting atmosphere. It really does make a huge difference. That's number one. Number two, you can look to partner with the state on tourism dollars. I mean, there are still grant monies available to do things that will help promote your tourist trade if that's what the board is looking to do. Number three, I think any kind of transportation improvement is always useful. I mean, your downtown obviously has had some beautification. I did the same thing in Oak Bluffs, and that's really resonated very well with the businesses over there, and they've seen a real uptick in the amount of business that they've seen. So I think having all of those things are possible, but I think stepping back for a minute, I think you have to have the policymakers of the town, the selectmen, have to really have a discussion about what's critical What do they want to see happen? What do you want to see happen in terms of tourism, in terms of economic development? And I think once you have that discussion, and once you have a vision, and once you have a goal, then you come back to the town administrator and say, here's our goal, here's where we want to be next year, here's where we want to be 5 years from now, make it happen.
With a major portion of our town government volunteer-based by the boards and committees, how would you handle that type of situation?
Obviously, I've dealt with a lot of volunteer boards. The challenge for any town administrator is to remember that they're not, paid, and you can't just have people run off and do lots of research and expect them to spend lots and lots of time. But I do think that you can respect the volunteers, you can honor their service on boards and committees, you can educate them. That's one of my critical things that I like to make sure happens, is that we educate boards and committees as well as employees upon, on any number of issues, but certainly the issues that, if you're a zoning board of appeals member, I want to have town council come in, or I want to have, some of the collaboratives come in and give a little lesson on how to be a zoning board member, and how you make decisions, and so forth. Because those kinds of boards, while critical to the town, are also the areas where you can have the most, screw up the most, for lack of a better way to put it. Zoning board of appeal cases, where I'm from, are a dime a dozen, and invariably, in the areas, in the cases that the appellant wins, it's usually just a procedural error that the board of whatever, if it's the planning board or the zoning board of appeal, has made. So education of board members is critical. Honoring their service, I think, is critical. A simple recognition by the Board of Selectmen or by the town administrator, or both, of their service to the town is critical. We started having, seems like such a little thing, but we started having a post-summer reception for all the boards and committees, and that was a perfect time because summer was over. The frenetic pace had died down a little bit, and it was just before the budget process really started to get up and going. So it was an opportunity for volunteers to meet with staff, and volunteers to meet with the Board of Selectmen in a little more, entertaining forum. But volunteers make your town go. I mean, that's, the paid staff does certainly a fair amount, but the volunteers that serve on all your boards and committees really make it go. Volunteers, I've found invariably, the volunteers are the source of the creative ideas. We had out in Oak Bluffs, we had an old library that was vacant and leaking like a sieve. And one of the volunteers that served on our housing committee said, hey, let's turn that into an affordable housing mixed-use building. We can rent the downstairs as commercial space, and we could have 2 or 3 units of affordable housing, critically needed affordable housing, on the second floor. And that particular volunteer really drove that effort. So that's, your biggest successes are going to come from volunteers.
As a member of this pre-screening committee, we had an opportunity to speak about many issues. And one of the things that I'd just like to get out there, because you were very, very candid with the pre-screening committee, and I would prefer to have these questions asked here. And I want you just to describe in your own words why you left as TA, and there was a procurement issue. So could we just get that right out there now?
Right.
Thank you.
Let me tell you, and actually, the library example made me think of that, actually, so I should bring that up. Procurement, as I said in front of the screening committee, I think, I don't think anybody knows more about procurement than I do at this point. We had decided that we were going to renovate this old municipal building, the old library, into what I described. And we applied to the Department of Housing and Community Development for funds to do it, and which we ended up getting. I think we got about almost $500,000 towards getting that done, and we used community preservation funds to fund the balance of it. But in the process of waiting for the grant to come in, the roof on the building deteriorated and deteriorated to the point where it was raining inside, literally. So we went through our own process and declared it an emergency, and we got somebody, the lowest bidder, to come in and just do the roof. And I think we spent about, I think it was $17,000 to get the roof done. Well, the neighbor, or the neighbor across the street, who wasn't particularly enamored of the project, decided that there was an opportunity there to contest the roof component of that project in front of the Attorney General's office because it didn't go out to a formal bid. And there are provisions in the law that allow you to go out when you have a true emergency, allow you to notify the Inspector General's office, have them opine, and give you the okay that yes, you can go out and do that emergency repair. Unfortunately, we skipped that step. We declared it an emergency, and we went out and did everything that we would have done had we notified the IG's office. So that was the basis of a bid protest. And the bid protest didn't come from somebody that had lost the bid because nobody would have done it any cheaper. That was the source of some of the stuff that I'm sure that if you've done your due diligence, you've seen out there. So in terms of procurement, I went through a bid protest, and everybody goes through certain, bid protest here and there. This one was unfortunate because it was a case where we actually got the job done for probably half of what it would have cost had we actually gone out and done the full-blown bid. And the reason for that is that out on the island, there's nobody who is DCAM qualified or DCAM certified to bid on municipal projects. And as some of you may know, you're required to be qualified by the Division of Capital Asset Management, the state's Department of Capital Asset Management. And so we would have been in the position of going out to bid and having people from, wherever, Boston or Brockton or Taunton, looking to get that job. And I think I may have said this during the screening process, that really irked me because we were looking at taxpayer dollars being spent on this building. We were being particularly careful spending taxpayer dollars anyway, yet what the state was telling us is that we would have to go out and spend what effectively would be almost double, and then we would be forced to hire somebody that wasn't even from the community. And out on the vineyard, making every effort to hire either hire people or contract with contractors from the community is important, as I assume it is in Wareham. I mean, you want your taxpayer dollars to come back into the community as best you can, and that so that was a little bit of what irked me. But it is out there, and anybody that wants to find it, my life is an open book, as I like to say, and anybody that's a town administrator candidate or a town administrator has to get used to the fact that life is an open book. So.
Would it be appropriate to ask of all the candidates some of the basic questions, like if they're the successful candidate, availability for starting and salary expectation? And is that good? Am I okay on that? No, I just want to make sure that I'm within the... Thank you. Okay, so my two questions are basic. We don't need to take a lot of time on them, but if you were chosen to serve in this position, what is your availability, and what would be, you don't have to give me a number, but a range. What's your salary expectation?
I'll give you availability first. Within reason, I'd be available within 2 weeks. And I say within reason. I have several legal projects that I'm working on that may require a little bit of time here and there, but not anything that would cut into the workday significantly.
Just to clarify, we talked about that at the screening, right?
I think we did.
that this is a job that we don't do other.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. No,
I-
that's, yes. No, my expectation would be, and I think your expectation would be, that 100% of my time would be spent tackling the issues in Wareham.
Mine would be 150%, but
Well, we can settle on 125.
negotiating already.
Yes, the percentage of my time would be the exact amount. No, and in terms of salary, you know what, I'm not going to give you a figure, but I would say that what would be fair to the town and fair to me would be somewhere in the same range as other town administrators and towns of similar size with similar issues.
Just a question for you, and this is going to strike my board members as strange because I haven't brought this up, but in the private industry and at my, the jobs that I've worked in, management at this level is often paid a base salary and is then offered a bonus based on measurable goals that can be achieved. Would that be a salary structure that you would be willing to discuss?
Short answer is absolutely.
Okay.
The longer answer is that that's sometimes very difficult in a political atmosphere, in a governmental atmosphere, but absolutely. It's done.
It is done. I've done some research and, but okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
I've done some of those too and lost my shirt. Because nobody ever agrees with the accomplishments, especially if they're great. Then they have to write a check. That's a problem. Michael, if you would, just to wrap up, some kind of closing summary
Sure.
of anything you'd like to add. And
I think I would only add, you obviously have enough paperwork on me to know who I am, and I think you probably know more about me than I know about me at this point.
they did a good job, didn't they?
Yeah, they did a
Okay.
very thorough job, I'll tell you that.
Thank you for participating in that. I meant to say that to you earlier.
Well, it was a little eye-opening, but actually somewhat comforting to know that that's what was going on. I've never actually done something like that myself, but I've
I
never
don't think
been
the
on
town
the
of
other
Wareham
side
has
of
ever
it.
done that before either. So it
Well,
was
you know what?
new to
It's
us.
congratulations to you, because I think that's well worth the effort and the time. But in terms of final statement, Wareham to me represents a very exciting opportunity to get involved in a town that has a lot of challenges and a lot of great assets and great attributes, and I thoroughly look forward to any opportunity to work in Wareham. And I guess that's really about all I'd say.
Very good. Yes, well, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Michael.
Thank you for coming.
Thank
We'll
you for
take
the
a few
water.
minutes,
Thank you for your
between
time.
now and begin the next one at 7 p.m.
Okay.
It was very good water. And cold. Well,
presidential candidate in 6th grade. I won't tell you which one in case you're on the opposite side of that particular race.
Yeah, don't.
And was tapped fairly early on by the mayor of the city of Pittsfield, the youngest one we'd ever had, and then came in when he left with the acting mayor to be his administrative assistant, and began to develop a great many friends by producing studies that showed how we could reorganize departments, eliminate staff, and outsource a number of our products. So when I said began to build a great many friends, I'm being a little bit facetious on that. I have worked to a great deal in the initial part of my career on the community and economic development side, both as the first Commissioner of Community and Economic Development for the City of Pittsfield, and then as a planner with the Department of Environmental Management when it was building out its Heritage State Park series, doing private and governmental consulting for about 6 years thereafter. Coming back into the general side where I've been the last 15 years or so. I'm known for having a pretty good sense of humor, for accomplishing the projects that get set out, for not letting roadblocks stymie me, but finding different ways in which to get things done. And those folks who are extremely, I'm not going to say extremely, someone on the liberal side think I'm a relatively, well, downright cheap. And those people who are, well, downright cheap think I'm an extremely big spender. So I usually figure I'm pretty much about where things should be. I have worked under tax caps both here in Massachusetts and in Michigan. Vermont is not a tax-capped state, nor is New Hampshire. And I will say that it's actually in some ways it's kind of enjoyable because there's some constraints and you have some opportunities that are forced upon you, if nothing else, to take the hard decisions that you might not otherwise take. I'm not going to bore you in great detail. I do have a little bit of a handout I'll leave with you. The ladies have seen it before. I did put a different cover on it this time. You know, and to give you a sense of what kind of communicator I am, this is a little chart about Carter by the ABCs, and each letter of the alphabet will tell you a little bit about me. V is vanilla. My kids think because the way I dress, always in a blue blazer and khaki shorts or gray or pants or gray, that I'm very staid and vanilla in that fashion. I enjoy kayaking, and frankly, one of the reasons that I want to come to Wareham when I look at communities is I am looking for a new challenge. And I think that Wareham poses that challenge for me and that opportunity to excel. And you have water. And I think it's a good blend of your needs, my skills, and a great section of the Commonwealth to live in.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. We'll go around the table. Mr. Teitelbaum.
Well, thank you for coming in. Appreciate your time. First, I'd like to start off with a hypothetical. One of us selectmen, assuming you get the job, one day storms into your office and demands that you fire a town employee over some perceived slight. What do you do?
I sat in this room about 5 years ago. Didn't make the final round. And the first question was, we want you to fire somebody, will you do it? Bottom line is, I'm not going to do it. What I am going to do is say, what happened? Let's talk about the particulars. I'm going to fully look into the situation appropriately in accordance with the processes that we've laid out, and observe all of the rights that that employee has, and take the appropriate personnel action based upon what's in their folder. What have they done before? What haven't they done before? When was that most recent discipline issued, and I'll report to the board in an appropriate manner. If that results in a firing, that will have come from the process. The fact that a select board member brought it to my attention is simply how it came to be. If it results in something else, then it will result in something else, and I'll live with my decision, and I hope you would respect if I've gone through the appropriate process that I took due, deliberate, and appropriate action.
Thank you. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks.
Thank you. The position of town administrator deals with many segments of our population for age-related issues. Can you briefly, by age group, describe your understanding of the needs of pre-20s, people from 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 plus, and also how best would you approach each one of these groups?
So essentially pre-20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and 60 plus. My son, who's 40, just visited me from Las Vegas the other day, and he was talking to me about music, and I had absolutely no clue. So some of these I'm not going to know from a direct experiential approach. Let me work backwards, if I might. In the city of Pittsfield, far before it was common, we developed the first adult daycare center in Berkshire County, and I believe in all of western Massachusetts. Elderly housing, councils on aging, service delivery to elders have long been something that I have been committed to and are well illustrated throughout my accomplishments. 40s to 60s, that can actually break. Many folks in that group still have children in the schools. They are extremely concerned about education, the quality of the future for their children in terms of recreation opportunities, cultural opportunities, a library, and then as you get towards the upper end, they start becoming more concerned about the value of their home, their work, their ability to have a job and to have a family life. And economic development, it plays a key part of that, quality of life, the safety of their family. 20s to 40s, that really is, again, that really kind of splits. The needs and wants of someone in the 30-plus bracket actually tends to be driven to a great deal by whether or not they've entered the world of having a family, of having children. Their thoughts at that point turn to, what are the schools going to be like? What is it going to be like for my kids? Are they safe on the street? Are there recreational opportunities? Why is there no T-ball? They're also thinking about, I really would love a backyard for my kid. I want to get out of this apartment. I want to get ahead. Where's the affordable housing? I don't want to have to leave my community, my family. And so if you look at some of my first-time home buyer projects, assistance to those, neighborhood safety projects, I think you'll see that I have some affinity there. On the under pre-20, again, it to a great deal, and there are some, no matter how many activities you're going to offer, simply don't want to do it. There's nothing to do. In Lee, where I spent a great deal of time, they all sat on a stone wall in front of the library. There was nothing to do other than go to the library and sit on the stone wall. That's just the way that they thought. We developed youth programs in Pittsfield, active parks and recreation opportunity, and again, it's down to the schools and it's what their future's going to be. And you know, those opportunities, we have to work with each segment of the community, and they will involve very different sectors of the government, often colored by what sector of the government age group the people and the volunteers are working on these issues.
Hi.
Good evening.
I think when we we were on the screening committee, I had asked this question, and it's near and dear to my heart. But did you implement any kind of policies and procedures for town employees?
Did you have something specific in mind, or?
Kind of it's kind of establishing, my background is nursing, and so I'm driven by policies and procedures. And there are times, for example, I'll give you an example. Say that an employee was on vacation, another employee was injured, and another employee was swamped with some of the work that was backing up. And we needed someone to step in. And currently, there aren't really written policies and procedures for that to be a seamless transition, to be able to walk into one of the departments and be able to
Okay.
have a seamless transition. So did you formulate any of those and implement any of those kinds of
Yes,
things?
and let me first start by saying this, your ability to do this and do the kinds of things that I'm going to speak to easily is dependent to a great deal upon, first, whether you are a union or a non-union environment. You are to a great deal a majority unionized environment. Secondly, it goes to what you can then collectively bargain with the union. What's in it for me? So, in one community, recognizing that when someone was out and they were out for a great deal of time, someone else had to take on a portion of their duties. We developed a procedure for working out a class. It was a little different than what might be in your typical union contract. But we laid out ahead of time how the pay for that position was going to be calculated. In Spencer, we began a cross-training program in which the clerks worked in the different offices so that when someone was out, somebody else could jump in. For instance, in my current environment, if the office manager for our visiting nurse, we run a visiting nurse service, is out, I'm out of revenue because she is the one who bills Medicaid and Medicare and the insurance companies. So we put another clerk in there to help learn how to do that. In our Public Works Department in New Hampshire, you have to be licensed and certified to work at a transfer station. And we were skinning down the number of staff that we had at that transfer station. And we knew we were starting to get, not borderline, but we knew that if we had one or two people out for an extended period of time, we'd have some problems. We had folks in the highway division sign up to take the classes to get that certification so that when someone is out at the transfer station, we can move someone from the highway division there. So these kinds of cross-training policies, temporary alternative duty, light duty, a number of these kinds of things, yes, I have developed proactively. I will tell you that often the way you find that you've fallen down is when something happens for the first time you just hadn't thought of. And then we have to develop a policy reactively. We're in the midst of rewriting our personnel policy completely. We've just converted from vacation, sick, absent, or personal time to a single absent leave, which brings down the total amount of time that people can have. But because it is so flexible, they've been most agreeable about doing that. It is important to involve the employees in this at the front end so that they can see the benefits as you're working your way through, so they can help you see the problems and help you understand what it would take to make this attractive to them, and at the tail end to just explain it to them carefully and deliberately so it can be successful.
If I could just elaborate, Mr. Chair. Kind of what I'm driving at is when we had one of our last audits, and the audit before that, and probably the audit before that, material weakness was glaringly apparent in the accounting office with the lack of policies and procedures. That's kind of what I'm looking for each department. So I'm not saying that the town administrator would necessarily be responsible for producing that, but overseeing the department heads that could produce something like that. For example, and Mr. Chair had elaborated on this prior, our police department is accredited, and they have, as I would see in a hospital, a huge notebook with policies and procedures for just about everything that they do. And I see that as a good thing for the municipal employees as well as the citizens, because it establishes boundaries and kind of common ground, like everything is being done the same way. So it's not just someone can just kind of step in and you kind of have those union negotiations, etc. It's more or less the policies and procedures for each individual department so that everyone is on the same page.
Oh, well, first let me say, if you don't have a clean audit after I've been here 3 years, I have failed. I have delivered a clean audit within 3 years of each community I've gone into. Secondly, with respect to the policies and procedures, we have the departments, we've done them in other communities. Our recreation, we usually tend to do it one department at a time. Our recreation department is currently doing theirs we start with a calendar of exactly what happens the same time every year, because it is amazing. Right now, I just sent out the memos on the budget, and people are like, you mean it's budget time again? Yeah, we do the exact same thing, the same time of year, every year. So please, on January 15th, don't be surprised that your annual report's due. This should not come as a shock. So the rec director, actually, and the place that I find is most effective is doing it through their evaluations, because it affects their pay if they can't produce these things on time. The first one was our Public Works policy manual, which was completed about 18 months ago. We tend to do, as I say, one at a time, because also many of these things end up being dropped in front of the select board, and I want to make sure you have the proper time to vet them, particularly when it comes to the finance, because that lays out our fund balance policy, our cash flow policy. This is our fiscal constitution, and I want to make sure that you folks have a proper time to digest it and vet it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We appreciate you taking the time to come back out and talk to us. And my question is, briefly, say 3 minutes or less, tell me and everybody who's watching at home, and believe me, there are lots of people watching at home, what sets you apart? You've made it, you're one of 3 finalists. What makes you the person that we should choose?
Well, first, I think I'm a strong generalist, and in smaller communities like this, it is important that the town administrator have basic understanding of municipal law, finance, HR law, procurement, public works, the basic principles. I don't need to know it all, but, Counselor, I need to know enough to put you through your paces and make sure that we've thought everything through, and that you've really looked at every angle. And I need to make sure that I put that engineer, and have they thought everything through? And have they done a true cost-benefit analysis? And when I say to the police chief, have you thought about doing this, if I don't know some of the basics, he goes, you don't know anything about that. Well, I have, throughout my experience on the community and economic development side, construction project management, my work with the state, with the engineering firm, I believe developed a wide breadth that is required for this kind of position. The second is, I'm a pretty good survivor. I did 9 years in Spencer as their very first town administrator, a community that had just gotten its police department back. The state police had actually been running it for 9 months. We were under federal court supervision for ADA. We had limited money in the bank. There was a rumor. People really thought we were going into state receivership. The average lifespan of a town manager's administrator is about 4.5 years. The average lifespan of a very first town administrator, when you're introducing this form of government, is about 1.5 years. So by either measure, I had a pretty good longevity there. The second is that this isn't just work to me. I have a real passion for this, and I have a passion for communicating with the community. And I think that's very important. And you're going to see a newsletter that we do twice a year. Might be a little different down here. You're going to see some weekly reports that I give to the select board. They go online. I'm on cable as much as possible. I go to neighborhood meetings as much as possible. I will say in the summer, if we could do them in a screened porch, that's always most convenient. In the winter, if we can do them indoors, that's always nice as well. But, you know, you put 6 people in a room, you got a question about police, public works, I'll get the right people together. When you walk into the office, no matter what's going on, I'm going to try to take a few minutes to chat with you. You're not going to get just brushed aside. And no matter what you think of the answer, whether you like the answer or you don't like the answer, you're going to get an answer. And I think that in my you know, trying to keep it tight, that really is the best overall reason as to why the community might think I could work well for it. And I want to be here. I have a couple years ahead of me on my contract. I live in a region that's got water. We were speaking about that, Mr. Chairman, for a moment outside. I truly want to be here because I believe I can contribute greatly. Absolutely.
It's a different kind of water here, but I'll tell you, on a windy day,
no tides.
on a
no
windy
tides.
day, windy can blow just like Buzzards Bay.
It can. It can. But I really want to be here. I believe I have the all-round fitness and desire and openness to work well for you and your community.
My question goes to a brief statement and a question. Wareham has a town meeting, form of government. We have a town charter. We have a set of bylaws. And I think that one of the things that the office of town administrator has gotten away from for several years is following those 2 documents. So my question is, have you worked in any of these towns or that you've worked in, either in Mass or New Hampshire, that had a charter and a set of bylaws or a set of bylaws? And how do you think that you managed in that circumstance?
Well, first, 3 of the communities that I worked in had either charters or special home rule state legislation. Each of them had their own set of bylaws, though it's weakest in New Hampshire. New Hampshire's not a home rule state. You cannot do anything unless you are specifically authorized by statute. So there's no innovation. It's very, very narrow band of what you can do. I have worked with several open town meetings. They can crush you. You collectively, I have worked on something for a year and a half, and you go in and you think you've done all your homework, and in 10 minutes somebody gets up in the back of the hall and just turns the room, and it all goes down. And you can walk out of there pretty crushed sometimes, I'll tell you. At the same time, it can be exhilarating because it really puts you through your paces. You've got to know your stuff. You've got to get the information out there. The other thing is the rules are the rules. Whatever that charter says, whatever those bylaws are, that's what we have to do. We have to work within that. Now, I have been known for trying to be innovative. I have been known for trying to fit, the round peg into the square hole. And if you know Stan Weinberg up in Shrewsbury at all, or some of the other councils I've spoke with, please feel free to reach out to them. I've been known to be energetic in how we make those documents work. But we have to be able to get the job done within the 4 corners of the document. And if we can't, then we change the rules. And you're going to find in here 2 pieces of special state legislation. The one that is of greatest interest to you, I think, will be we were only the 2nd one in the state to do something with respect to a betterment. We were able to make appropriations for betterments, and all those revenues went into a special betterment fund that the select board could then reappropriate without further town meeting action. So we could do streets, waters, sidewalks. And I think, Councilor, you'll find that piece of legislation very interesting. And we had not addressed in the charter the Office of Finance, and you'll find that piece of special legislation in here also. I've worked under much, frankly, stricter regulations in town charters and bylaws. I've worked for over 8 years under rules of the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development for UDAGs, old program, Community Development Block Grants, and I'm very comfortable that I can shape my actions and constrain my actions by the four corners of the document. Don't be surprised if I try to find some innovative readings as to what those words say.
Thank you very much. At this time, do you have any questions for the board?
I'm not sure how much longer we're going.
Well, I was going to give you a few minutes to ask any questions that you had, and then if you have some, fine. If you don't, then I'm going to go back to Mr. Teitelbaum and let the board ask.
The only real question that I have is you've winnowed a number of people down. I'm sure you had a strong applicant pool. It's an attractive community from a number of perspectives. And one of the things that I've learned most importantly is at this point you could probably put those three names in the hat and come up with a technically competent person. Frankly, that's only part of the battle. Fit is extremely important. I happen to have been very fortunate in several of my communities, one not so fortunate. What is it that this board is looking for in their next town administrator, frankly, is the question that I have for you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I will let each member answer that question on their own. I will not speak for them. I'll speak for myself, but I won't speak for them. Mr. Teitelbaum.
Well, there are obviously many responsibilities that go along with the position, but I think what makes us perhaps peculiar, and I think that's a correct word to use if you've been looking perhaps at some of the Department of Revenue reports about us, our shortcomings financially, our inability to derive correct numbers upon which to base financial decisions. I would say that the biggest challenge for incoming town administrator is going to be seeing through the process that I think we've started to try to do, but to see it to completion so that we can go to town meeting with accurate numbers, so that we can tell the voters how much is being budgeted, how much has been spent, and why. And sort of that's how I see the most important task going forward for the new town administrator.
Thank you.
Mr. Slavin?
In addition to that, one of the real issues we have, which goes back to the core, is basically getting back the community trust, confidence, and accountability of what we do. And as much as it is the responsibility of this board, it will also be the responsibility of the town administrator.
Mrs. Begley?
In my opinion, we need a leader. We need someone that's going to bring some cohesiveness between town hall, the appointed boards and committees, the elected officials, and the citizens. So I want someone that is going to take ownership of this town and bring everyone together and somehow build consensus. And I don't think that's magical. I think it goes to what some of my colleagues have already said. I think that it's someone that demonstrates accountability, transparency, and trust. And if you have a leader, people tend to follow that leader.
Mrs. Winslow?
I obviously agree with each of my colleagues, but I think the right fit this time is going to be not just the technical, the accountability, and the transparency, but somebody who can demonstrate a high moral integrity. That office, through the last countless town administrators, has been fraught with controversy in politics, and none of this is healthy for the community. Whoever sits in that chair has really got to remember that they need to live their life as an open book and lead by example and follow the rules. There'll be no place for politics in that chair anymore. This community has been fractured, and we're at a real serious crossroads that will determine our future.
I would echo everything you just heard. And I think if I was sitting in your chair, if you listen to the questions of some, we're talking about fairness. Somebody in that chair who's going to treat every citizen in this town the same way. And that has not happened here in many years. And has fractured the community, as Mrs. Winslow just spoke about. And a lot of it has to do, and I believe 90% of it, maybe even higher, is because, one, we don't have policies and procedures in place. The coming in and fire this person has been a problem for both the town and for our town council, who spent endless hours in court for nothing. The absolute disregard for our charter, absolute disregard for our bylaws by not only the town administrator but department heads who are not being managed properly by that town administrator. This board does none of that and shouldn't be doing any of that. We're a policy-making board. So when that doesn't happen on your level, sometimes people at this level have gotten involved, and that's not good for the town. Because we're politicians, let's face it. You're not. You're the manager of the town. So that's what I'm looking for, is someone who can come in, and each person just, I think, all said the same thing in just a little different way. Now we're looking for somebody to come into that office, take a leadership position in this town. Shaking hands and kissing babies is left to the politicians. Running the town by the charter and the bylaws, policies, and procedures is the job of the town administrator. And to bring in some of that creativity that you've talked about, I think that's what we're looking for. Did that answer your question?
It does, and I'd like to,
Mr. Slavin?
I didn't mean to interrupt Selectman Slavin.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
At one time, there was one of our unions that was thinking about dissolving or moving to another union, and they brought one of the most vocal, toughest of our local union leaders in and said, "What do you think?" And that union leader said, "He's tough, but he's fair." And I am a Excel spreadsheet kind of person. My wife says she's rused the day that I put her up on the balance sheet. But I do try to do that through a work plan that would be developed with you, because I cannot lead on my own. And I am working for you on behalf of the community. In Spencer, we did our first ever master plan. We had that endorsed by the town meeting, and everything grew out of that. And people could see that process. They endorsed that process. And whenever anything came up, we could say, it's in the master plan. See, here, remember. We gave them good numbers. We gave them strong audit reports. And while I did not do it alone, and while I'm not necessarily saying that you should consider this, I delivered 10 positive votes on 12 capital, debt exclusion, and overrides, 3 overrides. And I don't think there's anything much more that can say a community has some confidence in how well you've tried to manage their money and how up against it you really are than folks in Spencer with one of the 10th lowest tax rates saying we're going to take more money out of our pocket because we see it's needed. So I would hope that after this interview you can see that I might possibly have some of these attributes that you're looking for.
Any other questions? Oh, you get to ask more than one.
No, sir. That's
Okay.
the most critical one, because that's the landmine. That's the
I agree.
tripwire.
You and I,
Everything else you can usually work out.
we're on the
If
same
you get that,
page.
if you get that wrong,
And you just spoke about having successful overrides or debt exclusions, right? And that can only come with confidence in government.
I believe it.
As Mr.
I
Slavin
believe it
spoke
can
about
only
earlier.
come if the community has confidence that you know what you're doing and that you've done everything that you can.
Sure. Mr. Titlebaum. We still got about almost 15 minutes. So
Going back to your initial remarks to us, you indicated that you liked kayaking, so this is going to kind of dovetail into that a little bit. We're a community that has 54 miles of coastline. We have hundreds of acres of dedicated and protected open space, and we also have a lot of land owned by private parties that could potentially be opened up for recreational opportunities. But to date, we really haven't, as a town government, done a whole lot to coordinate promoting this town as a tourist mecca. And what would you do to get the ball rolling?
Well, first I need to see where you are with all of that. And, you know, the key to economic development is what does the community want to be known for? What does it value? And boring as it is, the basic old SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I think of no better community than Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, when those two boroughs were merged. And they tried to figure out, what are we going to do now that the railroad and the coal industry has passed us by? And it has recreated itself as a mountain biking, high-end Victorian manor, murder mystery. I know a little bit more about this because I actually was drawn to drive 9 hours to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. And there are other communities that have done this kind of transformation. But it's a community conversation. And it is, in some communities, the sole attack. Here it's not, because you have, in addition to your 54 miles of coastline, you have a substantial number of miles directly off of 195, Route 6 that traverses you, and the like. So I think that we need to step back, see where CETA is, see where the master plan is, look at the business community, and it may be as simple as starting to, let's first look at what are your bed and breakfast regulations? What are your zoning bylaws? Is anything feasible? That's a long conversation. We had it in North Adams. If you've been there to Mass MoCA, I can't claim to have done Mass MoCA. I did do the grant for the initial feasibility study. I did do the Heritage Park. I did do the Natural Bridge. Because a lot of times this isn't about just single pieces. It's about pulling it all together. And I have a strong record in economic development, and it's not just a project. It's a complete way of thinking. It's a complete way of organizing yourself. And you're going to find a number of very positive comments about my abilities in the arena of economic development that post-date when I was an economic development director. And I hope you'll have a chance to look at those.
I'll go on this. With a major portion of our town government volunteer-based, how would you handle that situation?
Delicately. There's an old saying that a camel is a horse designed by committee. And that's a great risk. And some communities can be torn apart. Let me start by saying I think there is nothing greater and richer than the service of volunteers and what it brings to communities, the energy, the enthusiasm. And one of the things that attracts me is in a conversation in some of my research, they said they were just overwhelmed with the number of people that wanted to participate in making this a better community. It was the single biggest thing they enjoyed about working in the community. That said, they need to have a clear charge and direction. If you've appointed someone and you think they're doing this, you don't want them coming back if they're all over here, because then it's like, well, how the heck did that happen? Well, if you appoint a committee and you don't give them a good, clear charge as to what you want, the thing comes off the rail tracks real fast. Timelines, you need to be very specific about that. Staff support, appropriate staff support, not to do what they need, but they need the research, they need the support, they need to get their minutes online, because that's an element of trust. Why aren't those minutes online within, the 5 days? They need to get their mailings out. Also, that staff support is, brings back to the staff meetings. Here's what's going on in this group. Town administrator can't go to every volunteer group there is. But that staff support, modest it might be, back to the department head meeting, help keeps us all on track. Respect, one of the things that I will miss, unfortunately, the week after next, is our annual volunteer luncheon. Once a year, we invite all the volunteers. It costs a few dollars, sure. All the volunteers are brought in, the selectmen, they bring a local restaurant in, they cook up some flat iron steaks. It's not horribly extravagant. The selectmen serve them. The selectmen are out in the main room talking with them. They get a little gift. It's not much. This year it's going to be a bag so you can recycle, not have to get grocery bags at the grocery store. It was a coffee mug. It's respect. It's recognition. It's honoring them. And I think that when you do all of that, the horse may come out looking somewhat like a horse and not a camel, and they will appreciate the fact that you appreciated them.
We've had an appreciation dinner the last few years, and it started around Christmas, I think. And then the first year was Christmas, and then the second year was after Christmas. And then this year, we actually did it in the early summer, I guess. Was it May? It was around May we did it, and we have a nice park up here by the water.
Sure.
And the five of us, the acting town administrator, and we actually slung hot dogs and hamburgers, and the moderator. Yeah, there were several people. I don't want to, but
Sure.
to go to your point, the board was there, and so we've done that now for, I believe, Mrs. Ekstrom started that I think it's been about 4 or 5 years now. And I got an email today asking about a fall, because we had talked about a potluck thing or something.
It's
So
important.
I think I agree with that people enjoy that. It wasn't much, but it was the fact that we said thank you. Thank you goes a long way. Yeah. Mrs. Begley?
Yeah, I kind of enjoyed it, but I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm kind of the tough question person, and that's kind of my forte is I ask the questions. And transparency, friend or foe. I mean, I'm all about transparency as well. And is there anything in your background that you want to get out on the table?
I spent quite a bit of time with Officer Philman. Revealed everything that I think needed to be revealed to him. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at that. My life's pretty much of an open book. Some chapters are better than others. I have a chapter in there that I would certainly rewrite if I had the opportunity to pull it back off the bookshelves. But I don't believe there's anything that I need to add beyond that. I've never, had a problem with the staff or, money or any of those kinds of issues. And the one thing that I will tell you, two things. Don't make the same mistake twice. And the one chapter that I would rewrite if I could, I took to my board. I just called the chairman up and said, this is what you need to know about. And I would do the same with this board.
The reason why I bring this up is it's not for embarrassment or anything else. The reason why I bring this up is we have a community that is very active and very aware of any kind of politics. And, personally, I'm not a big fan of Google, but there are many people that swear by it. And that's the only reason why. And I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your addressing it.
And I will tell you that after having made the mistake that I did, my board took the action they thought was appropriate. In the subsequent year, I got a very positive review based upon, it was down a little bit for an error in judgment. I got a very positive review upon meeting all of my objectives, and a raise and a new contract.
Being that we're getting short on time, I have the easy questions. My questions are, if you were the successful candidate, what is your availability and what is your salary expectation?
I have a 90-day clause in my contract. We're on a different budget cycle than you, so I am due to wrap up and present my recommended budget to the Select Board on November 16, I believe it is. I have never left a community without having completed a major task. I believe that they would release me from my contract early. I would want to try to be here early because this would be the second time in which I've finished a budget in one town and started a budget in another. But also I have time off and I have some flexibility, and what I did in the last community was I took Fridays. I went up there, I worked with the office staff, and I spent Saturday going through all the minutes and all the reports, you know, the kinds of things that you can do without necessarily having people around. I'm going to give you a rather innocuous answer as to salary. I expect that the salary here would be market competitive. I have a sense of what that is. If you've looked at the marketplace, I have a belief that you probably know what that is as well. But money's not my only reason for being here. And it's going to be the total package. You know, I would really like to be here. And if we have a package that makes some sense, I started in Spencer at an extremely low salary because I really wanted to be there. I thought it was a terrific point in time to go there. And we moved it up over my period to market competitiveness. But, you know, you've probably looked at the market surveys.
Actually, I haven't looked
Okay.
at them because, and I'll explain to you why. It's very easy to look at communities that are comparative to Wareham in size and industrial growth and things like that. However, Wareham presents very unique demographics, and our tax base is often much lower than those communities. So while those communities can often afford salaries in ranges, those are ranges that Wareham has never paid and doesn't have the resources to pay. One of the thoughts that I had was that in the private industry, often there is a base salary and you call it work plan, I call it goals, measurable metrics that are used tied to a dollar amount. So, for example, if one of the Board of Selectmen's goals for you for the year is that you cut expenses by 4%, you would get, we'll just throw out $5,000. If you can only cut them by 2, you get $2,500. And this is actually something that other communities are starting to use. I did do a little bit of research into it. I know there's a lot of resistance to it because people worry about politics, but as an HR professional for over 20 years, I can tell you that you can set metrics that can't have gray areas. For example, cut the budget by %. Things like that you're either going to do or you're not going to do. Would that salary structure be something you'd be willing to look at?
Well, first let me say that in looking at the marketplace, one does not look only at population because there are other factors. Numbers of parcels, median family income, per capita income, assessed valuation. There are a number to look at. I will say that your last salary was low. And I certainly don't want to negotiate, but I would also point out to you that there's a price to be paid for turnover and not having competent professionals. I believe I'm a competent professional, and I'd like to be paid appropriately. That said, with respect to your second question, yes, in my Spencer community, about 6% of my pay was tied to my total evaluation. So I had base pay, I had annual opportunity for salary increases, and I had an opportunity for bonuses that were about 6% of my package, all tied to specific measurables. And we have to be able to agree on those because anybody can cut a budget by 4%.
Yes, no, I'm using that as
But exactly.
because it's an easy example.
I'm absolutely open,
Okay.
open to that. I
All right.
consider it kind of challenging.
Well, seeing as we're nearing the hour, I'm going to thank you very much for your honesty and wish you luck.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for having me down. I brought the bicycle. It's supposed to be a great day tomorrow. You know?
And do I still get my minute, or are you done?
Oh,
Uh-huh.
please, please, please.
I just wanted to say that here's my take on things, right? I was brought up a certain way. Unfortunately, the 6, 7 of us that are sitting on this side of the audience, our life is an open book. And if none of us have a chapter that isn't that great, we're probably buried. Follow me? And there's only supposed to be one guy who some believe had a perfect book, is how I look at it. Unfortunately, in the land that 7 of us live in, 6 of us live in, there are hundreds of people around us who believe they have a perfect book, and they're not afraid to go on a computer and tell everyone else how perfect they are. So we deal with that all the time, and I certainly am one. I don't sit in judgment of anyone because I certainly wouldn't want to be in that position. But I just wanted to make sure that our background checker wasn't too hard on you. And what did you think of that process? Because I think it's the first time that we've it's the first time that I think as a town that we've actually done that. So I wanted to get some feedback.
I was starting to ask for the local anesthetic for the colonoscopy, but he was very thorough. He was a pleasure to work with, and I hope that I provided everything in a timely manner for him.
Yeah, great. I'll give you a few minutes. Summary, closing. Any further comments that you haven't included already? Take it away.
I really don't know how much I can add. I've had a lengthy history, varied disciplines that I think are extremely important to municipal government. Most important to you, and I don't do this alone, it depends upon the finance staff. I've delivered strong, positive audit reports, fund balance building, and a level of confidence to the community that their dollars are being spent wisely. I come originally from Vermont, where the state motto is don't never pay full price and make sure you're really squeezing that nickel. I hope I have impressed upon you my desire to be here in Wareham. I'm not just looking for a job. I have a job, a pretty good job, in a pretty nice region day to day. And I believe that I can help you realize the things that you want to have this community be known for. And I don't believe it's that you want it to be known for infighting, but you want it to be known for its progressive policies, its sound financial practices, and its community involvement. Pricing will be important to me, but I'm certainly open to working with you. And I believe that in most communities, they would say that, maybe it cost a little bit more than we had thought, but in the first year and going into Spencer alone, I can tell you we took 3 actions that saved that salary that very first year alone. And, in terms of structure, being challenged on the production side, I think would be enjoyable again. And I really want to thank you for an opportunity and the amount of time that you take. And it's not easy being in your chair. Whatever you do is wrong with someone. And
I'm glad you threw that. I'm glad you threw those last 2 words in there because we think we do some right things.
Absolutely. So I would never put my name on a ballot. I know that much. And I wish you well in finding the right fit for your community.
Thank you very much. coming for your interview. If you would just take a few minutes, introduce yourself to the board
Sure.
and to the town of Wareham, as I told you on the phone.
Yes, yes.
You're on our
yeah.
community television,
thank-
so everybody's kicked up with some popcorn, waiting for your interview to happen right now.
Okay,
So go ahead and take a few minutes, if you would, and do that.
sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And let me just start by introducing myself. My name is Paul Shue. My wife, Gail, and I have been married for 42 years. We have 2 children. One works at Tufts University, the other works at Framingham State University. And as you've seen from my profile, I've worked in Massachusetts. I've managed in Massachusetts before, both with Barnstable County and with the town of Franklin. The occasion of being here is that I have an interest in being your town manager. And looking over some of the materials, if we have a chance at the end of your interview, I had a couple things I wanted to present to you just for your consideration that perhaps might be useful, because I know that time is usually short, and when you're talking, sometimes things slip between the cracks. So I've looked at the goals that you've set for this year and put together some things that may be of use to you. Is there anything else, Mr. Chairman, you'd like at this time?
It was just a moment for you to introduce yourself. Now we'll begin with some questions from the board,
Sure.
if you don't mind. And we'll begin with Mr. Titlebaum.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Shue.
Yeah.
Start off with a hypothetical here. Assuming you get the position, one day you're sitting in your office and one of us comes storming in and demands that you fire a town employee over some perceived slight. What do you do?
The first approach is to try to dial the situation down. Obviously, it's an emotionally charged situation. It's a situation I have encountered in the past. And generally speaking, not every time, but if you can get people to count to 10 and slow it down a little bit, that helps resolve many of the issues that are like that. Sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it's a longer process, but typically I listen to what's going on, and by the time we're done chatting with the thing, we either find out if there is a legitimate problem or if it is just something in passing.
Mr. Slavin?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Question is, the position of the town administrator deals with many segments of our population for age-related issues. Could you briefly, by age group, describe your understandings of the needs of pre-20-year-olds, 20 to 40-year-olds, 40 to 60, 60 plus, and also how best would you approach each one of these groups?
Okay. I'll do it in descending order, if you don't mind. If you've looked at my background, you know that I managed in Connecticut, and in Connecticut there are no counties, so all the social services are provided by the towns, and consequently I have had a fair amount of experience in social services and working with different age groups, because we hired both counseling for seniors and counseling for youth as well in both those categories. In the senior populations, and one of the things that we can talk about a little bit later, one of the big issues, aside from being able to retain their homes, because most seniors want to stay, if they can, in their homes, is to take a look at the conveniences that they have in the community. I'll give you a specific example. We had a senior center in Rye that was a controversy because there was never enough money quite to do the center. They wanted an expansion, but it was also shared with the youth. We brought the youth and the seniors together on the project, and we were able to keep the project online and on budget, and also program it so that they could coexist in the same facility. And I know that sounds unusual, but actually there's some fairly positive interactions sometimes between youth and seniors that can be generated. In the other end of the spectrum, in the youth areas, and not perhaps sticking exactly to your age distinctions. The communities have had different approaches. Some of the new poor in the United States are single female head of household. And so there was a sensitivity to dealing with single female head of household child services in some of the areas that we had. In different states, there are different laws dealing with it. And it would depend on the law in that particular state with what we were doing. In Massachusetts, that has not been, is my understanding, an obligation. In Connecticut, there is a youth services program that is actually a funded program that deals with very young people. The folks in between those age groups, between the young and the old, generally are most helped with things that lead right now, at least, to jobs or job training. And that's another whole area of endeavor. Sometimes communities become involved in that. It's an area that unless you have expertise, it's a hard one to get engaged with. Is that responsive to your question?
Hi, Mr. Shu. Just as a background, we've kind of discussed this a little bit during the screening process, but my background is nursing. So my practice is driven by policies and procedures.
Okay.
Have you developed and implemented policies and procedures with town departments in your previous job experience?
Yes. I'll give you an example of one broad one that's sort of overarching. In the absence of policy, many times, and we all do things on a sort of an ad hoc basis in our lives. We don't look up a policy manual for everything we do. But we had one particular area in Rye that I'll share with you that lacked a policy, and that is we had outside groups, and I think you may have some of this too, who frequently like to come into the community and hold different events, decathlons, triathlons, different fundraising events, all for very good reasons, all charitable, all good ideas. But the problem was that it spiked up both the cost to the community in providing those services, the inconvenience to the residents who'd have blocked traffic. And most of these events are more than one community event. They'll involve multiple communities. So an example of a policy development that we did, which proved to be exceptionally useful, was what we called the triathlon protocol. Now, it didn't just deal with triathlons, but the protocol basically used, and I don't want to be too simplistic about it, but it used the Three Musketeers approach. We contacted all the towns that were involved in these events and said, look, until we all agree that this program can be conducted safely, without an inconvenience to residents, and without a cost to the towns, none of us are going to agree to this. And we would convene the triathlon protocol, which in the end ended up with much better events, fewer problems with the events, much less inconvenience to the residents during the events, and generally it was widely accepted. So that's one example.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you did something that was town-wide,
Yes.
that impacted the citizens. I'm kind of, I guess I wasn't specific enough. I'm looking more for policy and procedures within town hall with the specific departments. One of the material weaknesses with our audits was the fact that we didn't have policies and procedures, for example, in the accounting office.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for more of a policy and procedure so that there's clear boundaries and clear expectations within town hall.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more. I read your audit. I looked at some of the things in the audit, and I know that that's been a problem. And it's something that you actually need to have policies on to follow the GFOA guidelines for these and to make sure that you don't have audit findings in the future. Plus, it indemnifies you against lost funds, and it reduces the chance of mischief with those funds as well.
Thank you for returning.
Oh, thank you.
My question to you is, as you know, you're one of 3 finalists who've come to discuss your qualifications. on TV, and there are many people at home watching on TV. The community is very interested in this position. What sets you apart? Why should we pick you? What do you bring to this table that no one else can?
I took the liberty of taking the goals that you've posted on the website, the most recent goals for the community, and I excerpted the things from my resume. So there's really not new material per se, but I put the specific experiences that I have with each of your goals and line those up so that it's a little easier to follow it. I'm familiar with coastal communities. I'm familiar with diverse communities, both economically diverse and demographically diverse. I'm familiar with Massachusetts, and I'm also familiar with a paucity of resources, limited resources to deal with things. So those are things that I can bring to the table that I think might be helpful to you. But to put a finer line on it, I sat down and went through your goals and lined up specific things that I've done along the way that might contribute to those that you might find useful. Is that responsive? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Wareham, as you know, through your research, is a town meeting town. We have a charter, and we have a set of bylaws. And so my question is, in the reason I ask, obviously, is because I don't believe that town meeting happens twice a year. But the charter and the bylaws, I really don't believe have been followed for many years by that office. And I think that they're the equalizer when it comes to treating everybody the same way and making the same decisions for the town, and which causes less division. So
Yes.
my question is, in your past experience, have you worked in a town that has a set of bylaws, the town charter, both? And how do you feel that you met up to those documents in your management style?
The town meeting format is a little less precise in a lot of cases than, say, some charters are, but that's the form of government that communities sometimes choose. In Connecticut, Rocky Hill had a town meeting format of some sorts, but it was modified from years. The manager was responsible for presenting the budget both for the schools and for the municipal side of the organization. And they have their pluses and their minuses both ways, so there's no one particular special one. I've had experience with that. When I managed Franklin had just converted to a town manager form of government, town administrator form of government, and the moderator was still very much around and was a person who was a big help to me as we were making that change from that one form of government to the other form of government. So over the years, I've worked in a lot of different governments. No two governments are identical. No two charters are really. They may even have model charters, but they're different. Each community does something a little different based on what they want to do. So while I would not hold forth that I know all the intricacies of yours, I think it's something that I could come to understand and comply with. It's not unusual, even with the best of charters, to find internally conflicting provisions in the charters. And with those, you have to get hold of all the parties and say, what do you want to do? Because the charter sometimes have internally conflicting approaches to things. So, and I don't know that that's the case here, but I'm willing to bet if you look at it carefully, there's probably things that, you know, if different reasonable people could come to reasonably different conclusions in how they interpret it.
Okay. At this point, before having the board take a second round, I would ask you if you have any questions of us, or you spoke about having something that you wanted to present. This would be the time in that process to do that.
Yes, if I could. Let me, before I forget it too, Mr. Chairman, I want to commend your committee, Mr. Sweat, and the committee. They were very thorough and very professional about how they went about the business. It was nice to see. It was encouraging to see. They did a really good job. And I thought that I was doing my dissertation when I filled out the background check for your police department. I think it was 21 pages, if I remember correctly. So let me give you this, and perhaps we can chat a little bit about it.
Thank you.
What I've done here, Mr. Chairman, is to take the goals that were enumerated on the website, and I've plugged in some of the things, and I'll just, to give a quick example, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Economic development. We've done a lot of, and you know from my background, we've done a lot of public-private agreements, but we've also done public-public agreements, and sometimes public-public, private, and quasi-public agreements. And so those are going to be one of the vehicles, particularly during lean times, that will be useful to use, I think, in carrying forward the agenda of the community. In Cisco Systems in Connecticut, we did that. That was essentially a pilot program. The Forge Park MBTA station in Franklin was ultimately a $700 million agreement. It was the biggest one in the Commonwealth at the time we negotiated it. It included a YMCA, an industrial park, condominiums, and a brand new MBTA station that the city retained concessions on for running, and still does. The CBD revitalization in Ossining was another, we used the post office for an anchor, and then we relocated a new police court facility downtown, right in the toughest section of town. Today, if you go downtown in that area, there are two high-rise luxury condominium complexes on both sides of the police station. And that reminds me, your work in the downtown here looks good, because I remember what the downtown looked like. Looks a lot better now, and so whoever's been at the helm on that has been doing a good job. We tried to link public service to infrastructure needs. So if we needed a new lateral, or if we needed something that was an infrastructure need, if we could, we would try to connect our economic development plans to including those, so that it was an avoided expense for the community. And of course, that has to be done publicly, it has to be done openly, but it can be done, and it was in that case. In technology, and I won't go through these, but in open space, we converged we had a golf course that had probably the best knowledge base for invasive species in the community. And so we converged that with our nature center, which was about a 40-acre patch in the center of the city. And we were able to reduce staffing and increase the services in those areas, and increase the awareness of use of chemicals, et cetera, with the golf course. Historic preservation. I don't know if you're familiar with the Proscenium Arch, but many of these old buildings have them hidden over time. I was admiring the tin walls here as it came in, because they're unusual. And they may seem a little funny, but they're really pretty historic, I think. Housing needs, I think we talked a little bit about seniors. That was one of the questions Mr. Slavin raised earlier. We negotiate needs as they come up a lot of times, and in senior facilities in Rye, one of the big problems that we had with one of our senior places called Rye Manor was, as odd as it seems, parking, because more seniors have cars now than when the facility opened. So we negotiated an agreement with the private sector to add to the parking so that they would have additional parking. Doesn't sound like much, but it was quite a big deal for them. Natural resources, we secured dredging permits. If you've been involved in that, you know what that means. That's getting all the coastal zone approvals and everything for dredging is a bear. And we secured dredging permits for our marina. We've done the MS4 program, which I'm sure you're engaged in phase 2 and making that program. We moved into things like water gardens and drainage swells and rain swells on the roads instead of curbing in some places, which was environmentally sensible, and it was much less expensive for capital construction. Finance that was raised, you really have to, I mean, it's finance and personnel are probably your right and left arm in running your community. You have to have the finance correct, whatever it takes to get that done. There has to be redundancy in finance so that one person can't do something, make a mistake, and someone's helping out and checking with that. And in personnel, you spend most of your money on people, and we've done a lot of work in the personnel ends. Service delivery, and I'm going to meld that one a little bit into the school discussion at the end. The service delivery is something we took a lot of pride in doing very well, but also with the council and with the boards, we've also said with this age of diminishing resources, we need to focus on what are core services, because we may not be able to do everything we used to do. If there isn't sufficient funding for it, there can come a time when you have to decide maybe we shouldn't do something. It's just as bad to underfund an operation and lead it into failure as it is to overfund it. And so that was a very tough area to contend with. Finally, and we can save this for last if you want, but relationships with schools are always a tense item in cities and towns, not just here, but in most places. And the competition for money is very tough, and there needs to be some accommodation at some point between the two in getting the groups together. I usually work with the school superintendents pretty closely. I've had situations where I've had boards that would not meet with the school committee and school committees that would not meet with the board. I've had those situations. And what I'm saying is it's on a national level. It's not just here, and it's an enormous competition for money. And my only thing that I can say for sure is this, that somehow has to be overcome, because if it's a battle between the two, everybody loses. Both sides lose. Nobody wins. And your whole organization is affected by those kinds of things. Grants and the reception of grants are affected because state agencies typically, and I know something about grants and I know something about grants in Massachusetts, they tend to shy away from communities that are in some sort of a battle with themselves. We've learned from one of the projects that I've recently done in the last couple of years, I didn't do it, I did it with a team, was a long-term recovery effort for Nashville, Tennessee. And if we've learned nothing else from these big projects and the natural disasters, you really are depending on yourselves more and more than ever. The same thing is true when it comes to obtaining outside funding, grants, assistance. More and more, that's going to be, you're going to be your own worst enemy, or you're going to be your own greatest champion. And by doing that together, you'll be far, far more successful. So, enough said.
I agree. Do you have any questions?
No, sir. If there's anything I can help with, I'll be here.
Okay. Then, if you wouldn't mind, then we'll go back to Mr. Titlebaum and begin round two.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As you may have noticed if you've researched us or even looked around when you were here before, we're a coastal community. We have 54 miles of coastline. We've got hundreds of acres of protected open space to provide recreational opportunities, and also a lot of private land that could be utilized the same way, depending on what the landowners are willing to do. But to date, the town government really hasn't done much to coordinate or to promote Wareham as a tourist mecca. What would you do to get the ball rolling?
I guess the first question would be, and it's one that came to me as I was looking around here, is what is your brand? You know, what brand are you looking for? I went to a conference earlier this year with many cities talking about just this issue on branding, and I know you all have had some experience with branding, and I will say that in all the years I've worked with cities, I've only had one brand that really stuck, and I was very young at the time, and it was a fluke. I can't take any credit for it whatsoever. It was the management team came up with it, and it sounded so silly that we gave it to the city council there and said, what do you think? And now, 25 years later, they're still using it. They market it. We put together packages for UPI and AP and all the local people, and it was Willimantic, Connecticut, which is, at that time, it was really hard-pressed mill town. It had lots of vacant space, highly diverse community, and poor. And so we painted some watercolor hearts on the streets, and believe it or not, quarter century after that, that is a big hit there. It's a non-competitive holiday. It's something that people celebrate. Makes no sense. You know, the city's not really it has no basis of romance historically. But one of the fellows downtown that ran a sporting goods shop had his daughter design a logo with a moon, and there was a big footbridge over a river, and it just caught on. It was one of those things that just clicked. In Franklin, we tried the nation's first library because Franklin legitimately had Ben Franklin's personal collection of books, and they'd had it before the Philadelphia Public Library. But there's just too much competition for that brand. And you'll see it on the street signs, and we put it on stationery, but it's not a brand that people think about. What is the brand of Stoughton, or excuse me, of Wareham? I couldn't tell you particularly what Wareham's best brand might be, but I think it might be kind of fun to take a look at it and see just what's out there.
Just behind the time. You get there eventually. We have obviously certain issues in town that we have to overcome. One of the issues that I would ask you is, how would you build support and trust with each of these groups? Citizens, employees, and selectmen.
Performing in a predictable way and in a competent way generally has been one of the leading ways to earn people's trust, so that when you say you're going to do something, you do it, that it's been done competently, and it's been done on time. The trust of residents is very hard. There's a high skepticism of government right now, and again, that's not just here, but it's every place. And I think it sounds like old school. Maybe you could call it this way, but it's if you go about doing the right stuff, the good deeds on a routine basis, you tend to win a lot of approval from people. There are techniques that are different now, I think, for doing that, for reaching out. You have electronic media. You have many different avenues that you can use to connect with folks. One of the things that we found to be successful in that process was to reach into the areas within a community. You have many hamlets and villages within Wareham that are really kind of unique and have their own special history to them. And those might be means by which trust can be developed, by reaching out into those and having affinity groupings with them. Is that responsive to your question?
Thank you.
Mr. Hsu, this is perfect segue into my question. And I tend to ask a lot of questions, but kind of all about transparency. And when you said that this is kind of an electronic age, it very much is so. And there are many people that will Google, and there's as Mrs. Winslow had mentioned, there's many people that are very interested in this interview process. And is there anything that is in your past, I mean, you've been at this for a very long time, that you want to get on the table and just share?
We've used about 9 different techniques for communicating that I can count anyhow, and I'll give you the philosophy behind them. The method of communication a lot of times is driven by the matter that needs to be communicated. For example, if you have an emergency in this community, you're going to expect communication on a really rapid basis, on a regular basis. And it may even be, and it has been for us, we had 2 floods in Rye, and we had communication techniques that went down to almost by the hour with the floods from the rescue operations. And this is while we're running the Emergency Operations Center. And we lost nobody in it, but there were millions of dollars worth of damages to homes and public and private property. So that's one technique that we used, and that's a lot of times has to be electronic, but in an emergency, you're going to want to hear from the manager directly. You're not going to want to hear a recorded message generally, so we've tried to do that so long as it doesn't interfere with the actual operation. At the other end of it, on a monthly basis, what we've found to be very successful is we create a popular name index, and it's called a project update. The popular name index, you have right now in Wareham probably 40 or 50 things of size going on, maybe more. We'll take those and put them in a popular name index and put 1 or 2 sentences behind that, and then give that to you every month. So you know you have some of my council have called that their telephone reference, because if a constituent calls them, they can open that up and they can summarize what's going on in a sentence or 2. If they need more information than that, they'll call, and then we'll generate more information. But when we do that, we send it out to everybody at the same time. We send it out to all the members of the elected board. And so everybody has the same information at the same time. And then there's a raft of different communications in between those two. But that gives you an idea, and it gives those reports are generated by all the managers working in concert with them. So it also gives them cross-training on all the departments in the community. So they know, that if you're the librarian, you don't need to be an expert in the police department, but you should know what's going on in the police department.
I understand where you're coming from with communicating with the public, but my question, perhaps I didn't phrase it correctly, or you may have well, probably a combination of both, and you misunderstood. I was talking about you as an applicant,
Okay.
and being transparent in that nature.
Okay.
And and is there anything that you want to share with this board that I'll tell you, we have, and I won't beat around the bush, we have bloggers in this town that are sometimes very unkind. So I like to hit things head on,
Yeah.
and in a very open forum.
Yeah.
And I'm just giving you that opportunity to share anything that they may have out in the blogs anyway.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll share with you. Probably, I was asked one time, what's the most? I had 2 questions asked in one by one person. That was, what's the worst thing that's happened to you, and what's the best thing that's happened to you? And from a personal standpoint, probably the most embarrassing thing is to be dismissed. And I was dismissed from the city of Rye. And I had a new city council. Up until that time, the council had really been quite supportive and showed that in considerable increases in compensation for the manager. And that was Rye overall was a very rewarding experience. With the new city council, it was just the opposite. And that hurt quite a bit. It was not pleasant. They had some things to say that were not very kind. I never got much of a chance to say anything about it. But I'll tell you, it was a good experience from this standpoint. when this happened, I had told all the senior managers, if the council should do something that's a termination of my position, all of you need to stay out of it. Just stay away from this, because you're not hired to be here politically. You're hired here to be here because you know your work, you're willing to do your work, and you're competent in that work. And so you'll see in that particular situation that no matter what someone has to show, regardless of what was said about me, I've never had an unkind thing to say about anybody in the community. And I think that's the way it should happen. Is that responsive?
Thank you. As we near the end of our time here, let's get to the nuts and bolts.
Okay.
Should you be the successful candidate, what is your availability in terms of a start date? And what is your salary expectation?
I don't expect the salary that I was making in New York, but probably somewhere in the mid 150s area is realistic for this position. And my availability is there's a couple things with consulting I would want to wrap up, but I would say within the month.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. No, I just appreciate your time. I know there's a lot.
If you would, thank you very much for coming, and it's been a very pleasant hour. And if you would just take a few minutes and close, anything that you've thought of that you hadn't said before and you'd like to say now, some kind of a closing statement would be great, if you would.
Sure. You'll notice that I've been continuously working on my education, and I did that for a couple reasons. When I started in the business, most of the city managers that I started with were older, like me, I guess, and they were engineers. The city management profession started with mostly engineers in it because cities were being built, roads were being constructed, bridges were being developed. City management in the United States is not real old. It started in 1908. And I thought at that time, I was in the new crop of the MPA graduates coming out who were not engineers. But I thought at that time, cities and the needs that cities have are changing, and you need to keep adapting with those changes. That's why I started the PhD program as well. And I think we're in a great time right now. It's a painful time, but I think some very good things can come out of this for the communities that can take a long-term view and look down the road at what they're doing and how they expend their resources. So I overall, while it's a tough moment right that we're in, I think it can end up being much better for communities. And strong communities make, in my opinion, strong states. So,
Great.
Thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much as well. Motion to adjourn? I have a motion made. Seconded. All in
Mr. Chair.
favor?
When are we going to discuss?
Not today. It's not really. We'll discuss tomorrow night at our meeting.
I won't be here tomorrow
Well,
night, Mr.
I'm sorry,
Chair.
but it's not on today's agenda today. It's just the interviews. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 4-1-0.